Never let a crisis go to waste. Every time a crisis appears, that sentiment follows. Take Democrat Jackie Speier, who chides Trump for not canceling rallies over the virus.
The fact that he is not willing to cancel his various rallies suggests that he is willing to place even his most ardent supporters at risk. I think that he is showing, unfortunately, why he is so ill-prepared to guide our country during this time of crisis.
Like she cares for his supporters. So why just demand that from Trump and not Bernie or Joe? Is it just a coincidence such an order coincides with a political agenda? What's Jackie's next demand? You know, Republicans shouldn't vote in November just to be safe from those toxic, contagious voting booths. Yeah, never let a crisis go to waste. That's what the Russians were thinking when they tanked the oil market and put yet another nail in the collusion coffin. Then there's Todd's wishful thinking. This virus could be Trump's Iran hostage crisis.
Matt, you and I were talking about and we were talking about just before the break, what the Iran hostage crisis was in the final year of Carter's presidency. Not his fault, but it's a test in real time, and this is what seems to be.
Yeah, I mean, this does hold the potential, if it goes badly, to become a kind of Jimmy Carter-like scenario where the public just says, can't wake up with this anxiety every day. We got to have some kind of leadership.
So Chuck says this is what it seems to be for Trump. Does that sound like a fact to you? Now, you could blame this idiocy on polarization, but the swine flu killed thousands under Obama, and I don't recall the media attacking him like this, because he was their guy. Then there's Hurricane Katrina, a natural disaster made worse by corrupt local government. But the media blamed George Bush, because he's a Republican and not their guy. So that's the pattern. If the media and Dems hate the current president, then crisis is their tool. It isn't new. What's new? A president who responds in kind, because that's Trump. Now, his feistiness won't slow our country's great ability to handle this threat. It's what got him to close the borders, which was panned as racist in the media. But whatever Trump does or doesn't do won't make any difference to the press. Never let a crisis go to waste, they think. Maybe it'll help them in November. All right, Jesse, what are your thoughts on how things are going?
I would say the media is like a food critic that can't cook. All they do is criticize. And I was thinking if Barack Obama were president during the coronavirus, the media would say he's doing a great job, even if he wasn't. The president has been very aggressive with the travel banning, the quarantining, the accelerating of the vaccine, and he's been out on television every single day taking questions from the press and telling people to go to work and remain calm. What if he'd done the opposite? What if he'd stopped shaking hands? What if he did cancel rallies? What if he holed himself up, refused to take questions, and what would the media say then? They would say the president didn't have a grip on this, he was totally AWOL, and he was fear-mongering. So no matter what the president does, he's going to get heat for it. The point is this: if you criticize the president, do something with specifics. Don't just say the guy's been an abject failure and is unprepared. If you say the testing kits were slow, that's fine. If you say there's mixed messaging, point to an example. But don't say, this is just a sample here from 3 people. Trump is a sociopath purposely tanking the markets. He's a failure, a BS artist, and he has an unscientific response. That's just not true. Gavin Newsom, governor of California, was asked how the president has been doing, and he said every time we've asked for something, the president has responded immediately, and his administration has given us everything we need. So, it's not true that the president is mishandling this. The media is mishandling it. They're trying to press the panic button to score political points, and that's fine. The president just needs to say, listen, don't touch your face, don't go on a cruise, everybody remain calm, we're going to handle this, America always wins, we always beat these things, let's do things made in America, let's tighten the borders, and we're going to beat it. And I think if he sticks to that message, that's a strong message.
Juan, let me play Rahm Emanuel also talking about these rallies, and I want to get your take on the rallies in general.
You're going to have a point within about 2 months where you cannot have big events together. He is not going to be able to have his rallies. And it is going to psychologically, the office is isolating enough, and his inability to get the admiration, the adulation from that crowd is going to psychologically torment him. And his isolation is going to get more intense, and his tweets are going to get more vicious.
Now, Juan, I actually think it's a legitimate question about rallies, whether they are Trump or they're Bernie. I think with the age of people that come to these things, I would be concerned. But he pollutes that message by taking some kind of perverse pleasure out of it. And I think that makes it so that, well, screw you, because I can't trust that guy because he's finding a political pleasure. Right?
Yeah, you mean like going out and having a press conference about the coronavirus wearing a Make America Great hat? Oh, that was Donald Trump politicizing. Or calling the governor of Washington a snake. Oh, that was Donald Trump.
I'll have legitimate reasons.
I think that, if Jackie Spears is the best example you have of Democrat, I don't see Democrats being so political about this. In fact, what I see is that people are concerned. They want reliable, straight information. And the president had said in the past, if you want a test, you can get it. Then it turns out, no, the tests weren't available. Or the president says, this is just like the flu. It's no big deal. We got it under control. And then the numbers keep going up and people become more excited. Now you have even Republican members of Congress saying they're self-quarantining, like Ted Cruz, the senator from Texas.
Which media kind of loved.
Well,
right?
I don't know. I'm just telling you the truth. That's a fact. I didn't tell Ted Cruz, and the media didn't tell Ted Cruz.
But they got a kick out of it, is what I'm saying.
No, I don't care if they get a kick out of it, but I
do.
You care about the politics. I'm just saying, I wish there was less politics. I've always said to you, what we should be caring about here is people who are anxious and worried about the impact of the coronavirus.
Which is what.
And so when you have a president that is not seen as reliable, and right now we have polls, most Americans don't think he's doing a very good job with this.
I wonder why.
Yeah, public policy poll just said he is not disapprove of his conduct of the handling of the coronavirus more than 50%.
I have a battleground poll here that says he's net positive double digits in every single battleground state.
I just saw this poll because it came out yesterday. So the point is, when you're all over the map, but I think the biggest true test in terms of anxiety is the stock market, which absolutely imploded today.
Yes.
And what you see is people are anxious again about lack of knowing where we're going. Okay. What is the situation? Well, Italy locking down, Israel saying anybody flying in is
all of that is Trump's fault. Okay, we get it.
So this is a test for the president. That's absolutely true, and it's a big one. With the economy, with trying to keep people calm while also doing two things at once, not overreacting, not underreacting. Things are going to change every day. The number of cases are going to change, which the CDC and the president have talked about. So information is going to be different from day to day. It will not be the same. So you can't accuse the president of not being reliable just because information is changing. And the administration is holding a press conference every single day with the vice president and all of these officials to give a daily update directly to the American people, directly to reporters, to try and let them know what is going on and how they can best handle the situation. But when it comes to the politics of this, the Dow, especially in the stock market, is the exact economic collapse that Democrats have been asking for. You had Bill Maher saying he hoped that the economy would collapse. He doesn't care if it hurts anybody because that's how he knows the president will get out of office. The economy was the big barrier that the Democrats had to entry when it came to winning the White House this time around. And now they're loving the idea that President Trump may be taken off the campaign trail because he can't hold rallies, that he may have to self-quarantine and not be able to talk directly to the American people and push back against the momentum that Democrats have now in the primary process. You couple that with the economy, they like that momentum getting pulled away from the president. So, again, things will change. This is China's fault. China did this to the world by the Communist Party in China covered this up. They censored it, which made it spread, and they lied about it. And that's why we are here. We're not here because of President Trump or because of Americans. We're here because of the Chinese Communist Party, and Democrats should be criticizing more on that than the president.
So, Dana, the impact on the stock market wasn't the coronavirus. It might have been part of it, but we have an oil price war going on that's having an impact.
Yeah, I'm not a big market expert, but I don't think you could say that it doesn't have anything to do with coronavirus. Yeah. Obviously, that last week it was. Yeah. It had gyrations, and as Dagan pointed out on Friday, the Dow ended the week up a little bit. Then what happened over the weekend is that Saudi Arabia and Russia decided that this would be a really good time to have a production war. Yeah. And they started having this argument over the weekend, and that spooked the futures market. And that means that if you work in the energy field and now oil's down at $31 a barrel, that's a problem for the economy and for people that work in it. And I also think, if I could just have 1 second,
sure.
That's that the president's going to get criticized no matter what.
Right.
Okay, so it's fine. So then what should they try to do moving forward? And I think one of the things that he made a mistake on early on was when the doctor from the CDC said an outbreak in America is inevitable, and she got pushed to the side, she was right. Like there was an outbreak, but it was a manageable outbreak.
Right.
Like, all of this is manageable. I think what the president and the team, and maybe you'll hear from Vice President Pence here in a minute, is that going forward, we are going to have a situation where our hospitals and our medical teams are overwhelmed. That it's just going to happen. And so how are we preparing for that? What are we doing for that? And actually, the federal government being able to release that $8.3 billion to the state and local governments that are on the front lines, as Gavin Newsom said, like everything we've asked for, we need.
Yeah.
So I think if the president starts preparing people like, this is likely to happen, we're going to have some closures, everything's going to be fine, that would be a good thing to do.
Yeah, and I think there's, my question is, we talk about overwhelmed medical facilities, but what do they do with all of those hundreds of thousands of flu patients, since we know 50 to 80,000 at times die? So we never hear about that. That's kind of.
I think that we have treatments for them, right?
Yeah.
There's palliative care, or there's vaccines, or there's something like for this
But
right now.
there's
we
obviously
don't
a
have
lot of
anything.
death in that. Anyway.